What a glorious celebration, this Resurrection Day. Martin Luther once spent 3 days in a deep, deep depression over something that had gone wrong. And on the third day, his wife came downstairs, all dressed in mourning clothes, all in black. "Who's dead?" he asked. "God," she replied. Luther rebuked her, saying, "What do you mean God is dead? God cannot die." "Well," she replied, "the way you've been acting, I was sure God had died." "Woman, why are you weeping?" For Mary of Magdala, or as we have always learned of her, Mary Magdalene, this was her third day of mourning. She wept at the crucifixion. She wept when Christ was taken down from the cross. She wept when his body was prepared for burial. She wept when he was sealed in the tomb. And this morning she came early before dawn, weeping. She expected to see the guards. She expected to see the stone. She expected to see Jesus' cold, lifeless body. Instead, the guards were gone. The stone rolled away. The tomb empty. Her grief was beyond understanding. It was complete. Obviously, someone had stolen Jesus' body, and she only wanted to know where they had put him. And then Jesus appears in the garden. He calls to her, "Mary!" Blinded by her tears, blinded by her grief, she could not see beyond her own expectations of death and loss. And so mired in her grief, Mary could not see the risen Christ as he stood before her. So deep was her sorrow, she could not see that the light of God had not died. It had been transformed and was burning more brightly than ever before. Jesus was alive. Our tears also blind us. Sometimes it's very difficult to see beyond the personal pain of the moment, the present, the loss of a job, the ending of a relationship, the death of a loved one or a friend, the ending of a dream that we had put all our hope into. We sometimes can be filled with such pain that we cannot even comprehend the joy of a future. We become defeated by our own blindness to what is possible. And feeling discouraged and abandoned, we believe that we will never experience joy again. But the good news is that God does not leave us in that lonely, lost place. God comes to us wherever we find ourselves and reminds us that we are not alone. We are beloved, and we have much, much more living to do, much, much more to accomplish. And God calls our name into that future. As Mary hears her name called, we hear ours. Her tears of grief turn to tears of joy, as do ours. And we realize hope is alive once more. Suddenly the dark clouds roll away, just like the stone that rolled away from the tomb. And the light of a new dawn in the darkness reminds us, like Mary, that there is much more living, much more doing than ever before. For Mary, she becomes the first person to carry the good news of Jesus' resurrection into the world. She becomes the primary example of what we are all called to be, messengers of hope to a world darkened to this day in great pain and despair. What does it mean then to be a messenger of hope? The word hope is often so overused and it feels so commonplace that its true meaning escapes the world. It somehow escapes the reality that we have to live every day in, a reality in which missiles are sent from North Korea, and battleships are taking their places in difficult parts of the world, and bombs are going off in gathering places and marketplaces and stores, and people are being run over by trucks. And we wonder, how could it get any worse? So how in this reality do we see hope? Hope is not a feeling or a mood or an inspired moment. It is something that is lived somehow above the painful and the dull agonies of our life. We're down here living in the muck of it all, and someone comes up to us and says, well, you gotta have hope. And right away, we think, I'm supposed to feel something that I'm not feeling? But the more that I have come to wrestle with the word hope, the more that I am convinced that we must begin to see the word hope as God intends. You see, hope is not just a feeling or a mood. It is a choice, a decision, an action based on faith. Hope is the dynamic of human history. Without hope, little in the world would ever change. Hope is the engine of change. It is the energy of transformation. Things that seem possible, reasonable, understandable, even logical in hindsight, things that we can deal with that don't seem extraordinary to us, often seem quite impossible, unreasonable, nonsensical, and illogical when we're looking ahead to them. The changes and the possibilities and the opportunities, the surprises that no one or very few would even have ever imagined become history because of the hope and the faith that we have. Look what has gone before, and we cannot begin to see the future, but have hope, and we can go further than we ever imagined. Hope believed is history in the process of being made. It is transformation alive in the present. The resurrection of the Christ became the hope that shook the Roman Empire and firmly established Christianity as the power to which kings and emperors would bow. Hope gave birth to not only governments, but countries. Hope encouraged the weak and made them strong. Hope built new life for the enslaved and persecuted. Hope inspired freedom, even revolution. Hope is what has transformed our world generation to generation to generation. Hope is also how personal transformation takes place. We can't imagine ourselves very different than we are today, or healed of what binds and afflicts us. We can't imagine on our own ever being forgiven. We can't imagine our own salvation, but when we walk forward with hope, we look back at where we have been and where we are now, and we can see all along the way the evidence of the grace of God every step, every step. For Christians, the resurrection is the promise of hope, and Jesus shows us that that resurrection comes by way of the cross. Suffering and hope are always joined together in human history because the cost of moving from what is to what shall be in our personal lives and in history is always great. Great sacrifice always precedes hope, and unfortunately, it is always the price that we pay. History, though, depends on those who are willing to live and act and even die for the sake of hope, for a future that they know in faith is possible. Those such as Mary, who became a messenger of hope. Peter, who established a church because of hope. Paul, who withstood imprisonment and beating because of hope. And countless saints throughout the ages who envisioned a world of God's justice, mercy, and love because of hope. So here we are on Easter morning, and we stand on the faith of everyone who has gone before us, those that have received that good news of resurrection. And with this hope, we can now look into the eyes of the poor, the suffering, the dispossessed. We can believe that God is able to establish justice, to have mercy for all peoples. And with this hope, we can build new communities of faithful people that will overcome the barriers of race and class and gender, that will overcome our warring spirit. With this hope, we can begin to envision a world no longer able to live without justice and compassion. With this hope, we can build and plant and sow and live the vision of the kingdom of God, for our dreams will change the world. With this hope, we can find the faith and the courage to bear the cost of such possibilities. Yes, there will be sacrifices, but with hope, we will be the ones who weep for joy. Mary couldn't see the truth until she heard God calling her name. Listen then for God closely calling yours today and every day. Mary had no hope until Christ appeared before her. See Christ. Seek him wherever you can. Open your eyes and he will appear. Let hope be born anew in you today and be the one who weeps for joy. For Christ is risen. He is risen indeed.